I was online yesterday. Um, I was thinking about the oligarchy as I think of it often. And I came to asking myself whether it would ever change or be better. And it's a hard question to figure out because when you have a solid 30% of a country that will be opposed to something no matter what, um, it spells out a problem within the psychological states of those individuals. So what I mean by that is I think I mentioned before that there was a person who expressed their opposition during a phone call with me about celebrating the anniversary of a deceased person's birthday, that it doesn't matter anymore, just get over it. And it was really weird because I had never seen someone who with such defiance was opposed to that. And it was one of those things where it felt so minor and not even worth having a discussion or different opinion about. It's not like, we disagree on this political issue, or I like pizza and you like ice cream. It's just a thing where that kind of mindset seems to be integrated into so many people on a larger scale when it comes to political issues, that no matter what it is, you're going to have that group that is going to say, screw change, keep it the way that it is. And that's, obviously gone on since the beginning of the U.S. Oh, you want to end slavery? That's crazy. Oh, you want to have Social Security? That's insane. The only way you can ever seem to get rid of it is when the people who advocate for these regressive positions are by and large knocked out of office or have some uh, public consensus that they are trash for having that view. Look at the Republicans on Social Security. They ran candidates who said that's insane, could never work, yada, yada, yada. And then what happens? They get smacked up in each presidential election all the way up until Eisenhower shows up and he goes, yeah, I'll keep that. We'll support it. So it's not about a individuals by themselves have positions. But you see how that party quickly said, we can't win running against something that's benefiting so many people. Um, and I predict that the single payer system will eventually be seen as the same thing. We just have to see it implemented, which can't happen right now because we have all of these Republicans in office and corporate Dems who are supported by the pharmaceutical companies to allow prices to be very large and ridiculous on purpose, so that their donors can get as much money as they can, so they can pay for their campaigns. We've been over this before, the little pyramid of the two of them getting more and more wealthy, while the people at the bottom stay at the bottom based off of circumstances that are out of their control. But that's been the biggest issue I've had with being upset that the uh, the political climate is the way that it is, because I've never considered the internet something that wasn't accessible to most people in the U.S. Most people do use the internet. I think it's like 87% or something um, of America. It's some really large number, but I thought when you have a system or circumstance of people being able to fact check things and look stuff up whenever they want, you can really see some progress made in terms of informing voters who might have leaned one way about a particular topic or idea. So, for example, you had a person who said, "Oh, 71% of people support Roe versus Wade." I saw this on Twitter, and then this person says, "I don't believe that." And so I proceeded to share the link to that particular story, or to a poll that corroborated that claim. And that's kind of been an issue for me since since doing those Twitter interactions, that people, when they receive a statistic that I've, mentioned on my part, the 76% of Americans live from paycheck to paycheck, 63% that can't afford $1,000 emergency, the 43% of the homeless that have jobs but still nowhere to live. Whenever one of these is brought up, you would think a person would say, okay, that's a bad thing. And I have, in a few cases, when it comes to Trump supporters, try not to argue against that. But there have been some who've said, how do I know that's true? How is that real? There was a person who accused me of not doing my research after seeing a video I did, and I shared them the link and they blocked me. Um, so it's that kind of. I guess what I'm trying to say is that when I see those kind of reactions to things that you can't dispute, and that I know if they were going on under Obama, which they did, but if we were still in that era of 2 years ago, and this were going on as it was, they would have been blaming the Democratic president for these issues happening. Um, and in knowing that these people are so partisan as to not be, because see, what an objective fan of anyone does is they say, hey, I like this candidate, but I disagree with them on this, and this. They really need to improve on that. So, for example, I consider myself a fan of Sanders, but I'll frequently say that I think his position on the BDS movement is incorrect. That when he was running, I thought he tried to not. He could have been harder on Obama when it came to the drone strikes. That it seemed like he was almost apologetic in his rhetoric toward that particular policy, and it felt as if he was trying to moderate and not piss off people who were fans of him. Uh, and that didn't seem that politically courageous in my view. But again, that's something an objective person who likes a particular candidate based off of their positions on issues can say. And I've seen a very small minority of quote unquote Trump supporters who are able to do that in conversations I've had. I'm not saying, that's a confirmation of the entire number of people that can, but when you send a message around to hundreds, possibly thousands of people, and it seems that most of them react the same way, which is to either deny that it happened or try to defend it, no matter how bad or how terrible it is. It screams to me, just stop, just don't bother with them. And I've taken the same position when it comes to a lot of the people that I interact with in person. To this day, I still have to kind of close my ears when I hear a lot of these haters of Carter, for example, the president. I'll defend him on foreign policy because he didn't get us any wars, but this is in comparison with Obama going from 2 to 7. We were in Iraq and Afghanistan before, and you had a person who told me they didn't think that was a big deal. That being in 7 wars was not a big deal to them. They didn't think that made someone a bad president. So automatically, my interest in speaking to you is vaporized. And what I am saying is when you think that you are knowledgeable about a topic, particularly in this particular field, because particularly in this particular field, I know it's a lot harder to want to share that information when the people around you, both in person and online, seem to be rejecting of anything that doesn't fit their bias or go along with whatever narrative they've already sown in their head. And this is what's ultimately going to keep this crappy system in place of bankers being able to buy out a plurality of the politicians, and people just saying whatever. If you're a Republican voter, I don't care if Cruz, for example, is someone that supports the Yemen genocide, where you've had 10,000 civilians get murdered with U.S. airstrikes and over 800,000 cases of cholera, in the deadliest, in the most prolific outbreak of that disease in modern history. So long as he says that he's pro-life and walks around with a gun and speaks with a certain southern twang, it's all fine with me. Same thing with a lot of these still Obama supporters or Clinton supporters. They'll say, I don't care if Obama signed the NDAA, which made it to where officers could put someone in jail without charging them, and prosecuted 6 journalists with the Espionage Act for doing their job. Trump is the real threat to democracy, the one who's really going to go after the press. And it's funny, it wasn't until I started having more and more frequent online interactions that I realized how popular Obama still was. I mistook a lot of people. I will admit, when you kind of stay in your own bubble, as far as, so even if I go and look around and read comments, I don't directly engage with individuals for the most part. But when you have your own little circle of people, it's a lot harder to figure out, oh man, they still buy into that. They still think that's a good thing. They still thought this was a decent person who, I had a person who told me he wasn't perfect. And I wasn't in front of her, but I said to myself, when you have someone who bombs 7 countries that has, record breaking income inequality, and all you can say is they're not perfect, what's the point of even discussing anything with you? And it's that kind of mindset and behavior that is going to keep screwing most people in the U.S. over rather. Um, this idea that we have to accept what is already here, that anything that's new is unaffordable. You've heard about me talking about this 700 billion military budget. None of these douchebags are asking how that's getting paid for. I've gone now 2 months of almost daily posting about this particular topic on Twitter over and over and over again, and no one is telling me, oh no, this is okay because it will be paid for with the no, because they know they are partisan hacks. That's why they try to play this game of, you know, why do you care? Big deal, get over it. Um, and ultimately, it's going to really come down to if this scam that's being played on a majority of people can beat out the proper sources online that show the particular information, as well as an internal thing within the person themselves. You see, I've mentioned this before. When I first got into following elections and political events back in late 2013, I was a big, self-proclaimed Democrat. Thought they were so great. All of it was stuff I bought into. But when information regarding the Yemen conflict showed itself, reared its ugly head, all these different wars came out. The people I saw homeless walking down the street in my liberal state, where they say that, oh, we're helping out all these individuals at the bottom. I stopped seeing a difference in party. But how many other people are going to be able to sit to objectively look at what's going on with both sides and say, I don't like that policy. And if, whether you have a D or an R next to your name, screw you if you implement it. How many are going to have that ability to just say, enough is enough. You're not doing this and getting my vote. And that's what's so disappointing about the American public. If they wanted to, they could end any policy. That just anyone from running on a particular policy if they wanted to. If you had 80% of people or 70% saying, hey, we want to have, for example, free college, um, all the candidates would be pushing for it. Everybody would be trying to come up with an idea. How are we going to get this? How are we going to get this? How are we going to get this? Because elections at this point are based around two things: getting the most money, since I think it's like 80%, 80+% of the time the person who has the most cash wins, and trying to win the election by appealing. And in trying to win by appealing, a lot of times these candidates try to moderate their views to whatever they think a majority of the people in the state or the district or whatever want. And that is not political courage. It's part of the problem, and it's being used in such a way that doesn't reflect. It's not being used enough to make a positive impact. Just like the internet. If the internet was being circled around by individuals who are seeking to learn about, um, you know, domestic issues, foreign policy, and who wants to be in all these wars and who wants to, you know, not gut welfare for people that are trying to make it up, and we all can admit there are bums on that, but it still is something that a lot of people use to improve their conditions. If you had people who sat there objectively and said, I don't like this policy, screw you, in spades, you could see this be changed within the next 6 years, because that's when all the congressional elections will, at one point or another, come up. But it isn't, because people in these areas are too ridiculous. You look at the Senate race, for example. in all these states right now. The one in Tennessee is a moderate and a far right person. The moderate kind of is lame, but whatever. Mississippi, same thing. Arizona, same thing. But in Texas, there's a really good example of a candidate who's not really bad at all. And a lot of people do like O'Rourke, but he's running in an area where there are just too many idiots. Um, and it's something that he himself will not be responsible for losing in the if it happens, which I firmly believe it will. Um, and it's just showing how screwed up the mindset of a lot of Americans are, and why we live in a system where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.